Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and today we're going to be covering our next tier in the Picking the Right Fighter series, this time looking at the $60 to $150 range. Now, in that range, and frankly the next one, there are a ton of ships. I think I counted about 28 of them. So I'm not going to be listing all of them right now, but I am going to go ahead and jump in and just nix a few right off the bat. First off, the Reliant Tana comes in at $75. You should probably know by now that I really dislike the Reliant line, and the Tana isn't really an exception. The weapons are average, the flight model is junky, the shape means that the more agile ships, and there are a lot of them, can hit you very easily. Overall, I just don't like it. That being said, I will try and be objective, and I will give it this. I don't really like giving it anything, but it does have 16 size 2 missiles on board, which is far and away the most of anything here on this list, so if you like the idea of kind of having like a mini freelancer miss, this may be it. Now, the next getting the immediate boot is going to be the Gladius Valiant. And sure, it's got a cool paint job and maybe you like the weapons, but the stats don't support it being a wise choice. Compared to the Gladius' stock version, you're paying $20 more to get the same flight model, durability, and handling, but you also get less DPS in the more expensive Valiant. That's based on the weapons chosen for that loadout by CIG, so you're significantly less effective in paying more. Now, it does have 2 size 2 missiles on one rack instead of 4 size 1, so against a few larger targets that may help you some, but frankly, you could upgrade that same rack on your base version in-game and come out ahead anyways. The last two that I'm dropping off of this list are going to be the Hornet Ghost and the Tracker. Both of these ships have stock weapon loadouts that put DPS below the base F7C. They also have weaker non-military shields, and what they're really used for, being a stealth fighter and kind of scanning and doing CNC type of missions, those are really both going to be in the early stages of development or not really in at all. So that means long term, there is certain value where you're going to get some, or certain aspects where you're going to get some value on those ships. But for what we have today, they aren't really worth our time. And I guess one other one that I'm going to go ahead and drop off the list is the Avenger Titan Renegade. You'll remember that I covered that Titan in the last video, and I basically got my best bang for the buck award. But if you feel the need to spend $25 more on this one to get a cool paint job and less effective weapons, by a lot, go for it. Otherwise, save yourself the money and get the significantly cheaper, better armed Avenger Titan stock. So now that we've crossed about 5 of these off the list, that's going to leave us with 7 fighters to cover. We're going to start by taking a look at the militia-focused version of a starter ship, which of course is going to be the Mustang Delta. Overall, the Delta is kind of interesting, mainly because of how it stacks up with such a high increase in weaponry over the Alpha and the other Mustangs. I look at this and see a ship that has a sluggish pitch and yaw compared to others that we're reviewing, one of the slowest SCM speeds, and average top speed when you kick in the afterburner. But there's a lot of redeeming factors. First off, the cockpit view is fantastic. You have the ability to kind of see down below the horizon a little bit. You don't have a lot of struts in your way, so visibility is really good. Secondly, even though it's a sluggish flyer for the most part, it does have a really good amount of roll ability. So if your flight approach is more to combine roll and pitch, you may be okay with how this actually handles. The durability of this ship's hull is 5,503, which is on the lower end of the list, but it does have 10,080 shield HP based on the quality of the secure hide military grade shields. Additionally, the Delta is supposed to have some of the stealth qualities to kind of help offset that lack of durability on the hull to some degree. There may be some of that in game right now, but stealth is still a little bit wonky, like I mentioned before. DPS-wise, it's able to deal the second highest amount of damage on this list, which seems to make it a little bit of a gas cannon. There's a catch though, because one set of weapons on this ship are a set of Dumbfire Jericho rocket pods, which obviously means high damage output, but you also have a very finite number of those rockets, and they don't have any tracking ability. They just fire in a straight line. So unless you're trying to engage something that's significantly larger than you, like a Freelancer or a Constellation, you're going to miss a lot of the shots that you're taking, leaving you really just with 2 size 2 fixed Badgers and 2 size 2 lasers on the nose turret to do the work. So at the end of the day, you have a ship with some nice upsides, but the real brute force of the ship, being the rocket pods, is very limited, both in application and your continual ability to fire them. Now, moving on from a budget brand like the Consolidated Outlands, we'll find ourselves back in luxury territory with a combat version of a line of versatile ships being the 325A. Now, as we talked about in the last video, the 300i had gotten some wonderful improvements and good performance in combat, which with the 325 being the dedicated fighter of the same line of ships, it got a pretty big bump as well. At $70, we have a speed of 225 meters per second and 1,235 under full afterburner, so it's pretty quick compared to some others on this list. Agility is on the lower end for both pitch and yaw, and kind of middle of the pack when we start talking about roll rate. Out of these 7 ships, the whole hit points is third best at 6,150. And with 2 all-stop shield generators, it's going to share the top spot for others that use that same shield setup, which is going to be 10,800 HP. Now, I was actually expecting the 325 to have better DPS than it does because it kind of feels stronger when you actually fly it. But with 2 size 3 fixed shredders and 1 size 4 mixed fixed M6A laser cannon, the sustained DPS sits at 1188, which is kind of middle of the pack for the group. Now, I think that's probably a function of the slower rate of fire that we see with the shredders and the laser cannon. So your initial hits, if you're accurate, will do some pretty good damage. But in the current state of balance, guns like ballistic Gatlings and laser repeaters are also winning out. Another point here is these are all fixed, and if you're a stick pilot, you generally like the idea of having gimbals and using the auto gimbal for tracking, which would mean that you're sizing down on everything in order to actually do that. So it kind of depends on who you are and how accurate you can be on how much you actually like this ship. Now, where I like the damage output ability of this ship is in regards to missiles, because it brings 4 size 2 EM missiles and 4 size 3 cross-section. So you can finish off some targets with a larger missile payload than some of these other ships are offering. The interior also offers something in a bed, toilet, and kitchenette that the others just don't. So it's a little bit more homey and effective for long-duration jaunts, and having an ability to log out aside from a station. Now, one of the newer additions to the game was the Anvil Arrow, and it was a straight-to-flight ready surprise that came in at $75 in cost. Now, this has rapidly become a lot of people's go-to ship for combat right now, and for some good reasons. It kind of grew up in the new flight model, so it was one of the first ships that really flew the way that it should, meaning a lot of people had more control using it and were more comfortable using this than people that were in other ships. Aside from timing, though, it has one of the better flight models in general. It's got 75 degrees of pitch and yaw per second and a wild 285 degrees of roll, meaning you can really stay on target and really dodge and aim very, very well. Speed-wise, it's kind of average-ish for this group, with an SCM speed of 200 meters per second and an afterburner taking it to 1235. It has really good shields like other on the list, being 2 all-stops, which are some of the best in the game, giving it 10,800 HP in the shield pool. However, the hull is very weak, coming in at 4,180 HP, which is going to be the second lowest on this list. Now, damage output from weapons is going to be 937 DPS, which is the second lowest on this list. But it is worth pointing out that the nose currently comes with a turret that carries 2 size 1 bulldogs, meaning you could swap that out with a gimbaled size 2 or a fixed size 3 to really do a lot more damage on your output. Along with that nose turret, you have 2 Scorpion Gatling guns on gimbals, which I absolutely love. The Scorpions are some of my favorite guns in the game right now. So on a ship this small, you also have 8 total missiles, with half being 2 IR and the other half being 2 EM, or size 2 EM. So all in all, what you have is the Arrow is a ship that just really does what it's supposed to do. And for $75, it's really one of the better ships in this category, which makes it really hard to ignore. Up next is a ship that's been around quite a while, and was actually one of the first ships that I reviewed in my Should You Buy series a long time ago, being the Aegis Gladius. Now, it's gone through a lot of reworks in that time, but considering that it's a core component ship in the campaign, Squadron 42, it's a ship that's really stayed up with its balance and its updates, so it's basically always in a good spot. At $90, you get a ship that's either average or better than most in all of the categories that we're going to talk about. The 208 SCM speed is about average, but the 1236 afterburner speed is second highest on the list. The agility is about middle of the pack for yaw and pitch, but it rolls incredibly well. The whole hit points is on the top end of the middle of the pack, being 6,051 HP, with shields again running the all stops, giving you 10,080 hit points. The guns on this ship are really pretty solid, giving you 2 fixed size 3 Panther laser repeaters and 1 fixed size 3 Mantis ballistic Gatling, which, if you remember a few minutes ago, I just said were 2 of the strongest types of weapons in the game right now, giving you an overall DPS of 1272, which means that there's just 2 other ships being higher than that, one of which was the Delta, which again I feel is kind of artificially inflated. Now, one of the selling points that CIG likes to keep pointing out with the Gladius is that it's kind of got a more advanced missile loadout. And there is justification for that because you do carry 8 total missiles. But on the Gladius, 4 of those are size 2 IR missiles. The other 4 are actually size 3 cross-section arresters, which are basically my favorite missiles for fighters right now. The Gladius is kind of a legacy ship that performs more like a new dog, and while the stylings and interior of the cockpit may not be real fancy or futuristic, it does the job well every time. Now, entering the $100 price point, we have the Anvil Hawk, which is a small fighter and bounty hunting ship that has some interesting traits that make it a contender in just about every regard. The speed is 225 in SCM. It's at 1315 at Afterburner Cruise, which means that it basically shares the top SCM speed with the 325A and is barely just behind the fastest Afterburner ship. Agility-wise, it has the best yaw and pitch, which is good because it has an abysmal roll rate. Durability-wise, the hull has an HP of 7,200, or the second best on this list, and the shields are going to be all-stop, so you have that same 10,800 HP there, which matches the others that are using that for tops on the list. So you're probably looking at this and saying, it's fast and durable, what's it missing? Well, the DPS is actually 1628, which is also highest on the list. That being said, it has 2 size 1 distortion guns, which, as I mentioned before, don't really work that well in the verse right now, and they don't really do any physical damage, so the number that shows for their damage output is really artificially inflating the output here. If you were to swap those distortions out with maybe something like M3As to match the other lasers that are on this ship at size 2, you'd probably come out somewhere around the 1150 to 1200 DPS range, which is closer to many others on this ship. That's not really a bad thing because it succeeds in so many areas, but I don't want anybody looking at the DPS number and running crazy with it. The Hawk doesn't carry any missiles on board, but instead it has an EMP generator to help with the bounty hunting aspect of the game, which can obviously be used in combat, though it is a relatively low-powered EMP. That being said, it's still an add that none of the other ships in this category actually have. Overall, the Hawk was a ship that I liked, but it's really turned into quite a nice little fighter, and it's getting more and more attention, at least from me, though I still don't see a lot of people flying them in the verse. So I would suggest that once the free fly event comes up, I would probably go out and try and rent one, because I think this is a ship that may surprise a lot of people. And we're going to go ahead and start wrapping this up with 2 more ships, both coming in at the $110 price point, which includes the Drake Buccaneer and the F7C Hornet. If we start with the Buccaneer, it's one of my more favorite ships to fly from time to time. It's got a top speed of 210 SCM, which is a little above average, and it sports the best afterburn speed at 1,317. It also has some crazy acceleration to support its flight model. The agility is lacking a little bit in all directions, but with the afterburner and your ability to retro and the low mass, it basically performs really well, giving you an ability to change directions and vectors very, very well, especially compared to other ships. The damage and durability on the ship is flat out concerning, though. You have a hull HP at a weak 4,060 and sporting web shields, which are only going to yield you about 7,200 HP. You're very much a weak ship. The DPS on this ship is 1184, but that's because you have a spinal-mounted gun that's currently missing from the calculations, meaning that you're only seeing 2 size 1 Gatlings and 2 size 3 Panthers, which means that if you were to add a size 4 gun mount, it's going to drastically improve your damage output. And once you get that in place, this ship actually has one of the higher DPSs on the list, especially when you end up pairing that with the 4 size 2 Rattler IR missiles, which, if you're unfamiliar, are basically a swarm of mini crap-inducing missiles that make your cockpit light up real red. It does come with a good power plant on board, which helps you to support the large number of weapon hardpoints and the really legit engines. I would highly encourage you to kind of increase your shields through upgrades and try and run ballistics where you can, so you can try and offset some of the struggles with durability by providing a better shield output. Overall, I really like the Buccaneer, but the durability and to some extent the lacking agility are concerning to me, though I think there are ways to offset both of those. The last ship to cover is the F7C Hornet, which is the base model of many different Hornet ships. The one that comes with the F7C basically has 2 size 3 fixed Mantis Gatling guns. And that's it. However, much like the Buck, you have an open hardpoint on the nose, enabling you to run another size 3 weapon. The Mantises are flat out legit, giving you 876 DPS of output when there's 2 of them, so if you're at a third, you're basically up to about 1300 DPS, which would be on the very high end of this list. Missile-wise, you have 4 size 1 IR missiles and 4 size 2 EM missiles, so a kind of an average to underwhelming missile supply. The Hornet is known as a heavier brawler compared to basically all of the ships on this list, which means that you have a slower flight model and significantly more durability and armor. Top speed-wise, you're at 192 SCM, easily lowest on the list, and about 1229 for afterburner speed. Agility is really terrible compared to the other smaller ships here, though it's enough that if you're a good pilot, you're not going to be totally overmatched by some others that are faster. The hull durability is way above the rest, though, giving you an HP of 11,042. And shields right now are at 7,200, but you can easily upgrade those to make you a much more durable craft. Regardless, this ship is probably one that has the higher top ends if you don't mind spending some in-game credits to upgrade it a little bit. So that's your rundown of all of these ships, but which should you choose? And I think that's going to depend a little bit based on what you're wanting to do. If you prefer the faster flight model and highly controllable ships, I love the Arrow, and I think that's probably one of the best options on this list. That being said, I'm starting to come around on recommending the Hawk a little bit more as well. If you want the potentially best brawler of the group, the Hornet is really the only one with the upside and the qualities to stick around and take a punch where the others fall short, so that's an easy recommendation. Finally, if you just really want a well-rounded option, the Gladius is really hard to overlook, but at the end of the day, you need to pick what suits your needs best based on what I just provided. So that's going to be it for now. Stay tuned for one more video on a rundown of fighters and a lot more content coming your way soon. I appreciate you all watching. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.